when you're having conversations, it's so important to ask open-ended questions. We don't want to ask a closed question, right? We want to keep that conversation going as long as we can. And even if you're in the middle of the conversation and your loved one gets upset or angry or the conversation takes a really deep turn, it's okay to stop that conversation and continue it at a later time. Hit that pause button whenever you need to.
Welcome to the First Responder Families podcast, sponsored by Shatterproof at FHE Health, a nationally recognized behavioral health provider. I am your host, Ivona Bhadha, a Director of Family Services at FHE Health and a family, couples, and trauma therapist. Join me for meaningful conversations and talks that support wellness and mental health of first responders and their families. Hello, everyone. We are back with a new show on our First Responder Families podcast. Here's Ivona Bhadha, and I'm here with amazing guests. I cannot wait to bring this episode on the power of language and communication with our loved ones struggling with substance use disorder or mental health or both. And I have here Kathy Strain. She is advocate, family advocate, and peer services advocate at Partnership to End Addiction. Hello, great to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I have our beloved Joi Honer, who is a director of our Alumni Services. So she's managing, directs, and has a great team of people who are helping our patients to navigate their life, their sober lifestyle after treatment. So welcome, Joi.
Great to be here, Ivona. I'm excited about I'm excited about what we do here at FHE for our alumni, and I'm also really excited what you brought to our program with the support we give families. And that's such an important piece of treatment.
Mhm.
It's valuable.
Yes, yes. And what we are going to talk about is both of you have a lot to say because I know Joi for longer than Kathy, but just even from short conversation with Kathy, I just got so inspired. Like there's so much to learn. We in the past we said to families, like there's not so much you can do. There's this powerlessness and make sure you don't enable, right? Like you focus on what you shouldn't be doing. And over the years, the evolution also in treatment, in the prevention of addictive disorders, I'm just blown away how much actually parents and loved ones, like spouses of people struggling with substance use, how much they actually can learn and how much they have control when it comes to their like choice of words and language. So before we get into those tools, I am so curious, like what brought you into this field of advocacy and really being passionate in working either with recovering folks or loved ones of people struggling?
For me, I got into this field because I have children that are in recovery and also lost one child to a overdose on Overdose Awareness Day, August 31st of 2018. Um, Thomas that passed away was actually my nephew, who I was raising from the time that he was 4. He passed away when he passed away when he was 27. I'm sorry, his dad passed away when he was 4. He came to live with me a few years later. Um, and um, so his dad passed away from an overdose. And at that time, I was younger. I didn't really understand addiction at all. I thought really it was a choice. I was like really upset, like, that this was happening. And it really wasn't until I watched it play out years later, in front of my own eyes, that I really started to understand, the disease of addiction. When my children played a lot of sports, they were prescribed opioid pain pills. It was, back 2009 to 2013, they were prescribed a ton of different pills, throughout the years. And I didn't really realize they were becoming addicted to them. And then when I realized it was terrifying, I was like embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to reach out to. I didn't know who to turn to. Um, I thought, that I could, quick fix them, right? We'll figure this out. We'll fix it. Nobody will know. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And, when I decided, I was silent for so long, I went online one day and I found another family member online that was struggling. I eventually found Partnership to End Addiction, which then was Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. Um, and I began parent coaching with a coach, and then I took the parent coaching course and became a parent coach myself. So, but during that time, at some point, I decided that I just didn't want to have any other person feel the way that I felt, as alone and afraid and terrified as I was.
Mhm.
In those years, it was terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, first of all, I'm really sorry for your loss. And also thank you for sharing and being transparent about how it felt and how that despair actually, turned you into curiosity, finding something and now it's really a passion helping other parents not to feel like you felt so terrified. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to give her a shout out because she not only does what she does for partnership, but she's an advocate across communities. We belong to several advocacy groups together, supporting Narcan, distribution, supporting safe support of substance users, harm reduction and the value of harm reduction. So while it did ripple in her immediate life, the ripple that she's made in the area that she's in, and she actually goes, she goes to conventions, not just locally. She goes to organizational conventions. She goes to the White House, I think, Kathy. Is that correct? You've been at the White House?
I have. I've been
You know,
I've been to just about every place in DC.
Mm.
So I'll be at SAMHSA headquarters in a few weeks working like on family information. So
so she really is not only just an advocate and a coach, but she's making a bigger impact. And I just wanted to give her that
Yeah.
shout out.
Yeah. Yeah. I can sense it and I can feel it. And I'm so happy to have you here, Kathy. And the different kind of shout out for you, Joey. You do make with your team a big impact for people who are leaving a safe place of treatment and they are just going back to the community and the support they need and the empowerment. How did you end up in that kind of job
Oh,
yourself?
well, me. So I am a person in long-term recovery. I'm in my 43rd year of long-term recovery, which is amazing to me. I feel blessed. Um, I was in clinical. I actually grew up in the field, so to speak. I was a mental health specialist or a tech, and then I became a counselor. And then over the years, I became a director of a women's program and a men's program. And I kind of needed a break from inpatient treatment. And instead of leaving the organization I was with, they suggested that I focus on alumni. And so once started focusing on alumni, my heart, I just got so full of gratitude. Because to be able to me, the hallmark of a good program is that they support their alumni, and not just say they do, but demonstrate that through what they offer, what they give, how they communicate. And so, and part of the reason that I know Kathy is that in one organization that I work for, I was actually charged with creating parent group and family groups. So in a sense, like alumni groups for families whose loved ones were treated. And watching the power of parent to parent or spouse to spouse communication and support, that just that the power of that is um so significant, because substance use and even mental health operate in this shame environment where what did I do? What did I say? And so watching people, you talk about communication, watching parents who have been there teaching other parents that, hey, I tried this and it didn't work, but you might want to try this. Watching that process was beyond amazing. I'm just so blessed to be a part of a community, not only of people with use disorders, but parents and loved ones of people who suffer with use and mental health disorders, because that community is just as powerful and strong as those support groups for substance use and mental health.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because in one of our family support group we have on Wednesdays, we have typically parents coming, and they have sometimes just mental health loved one, mental health issues, struggling person, not substance use. And yet at the end of the session, when it comes to, for example, coaching them how to communicate from the place of empathy, but manage empathy. You don't have to like over sugarcoat things, but when you're coming also from the place of self-empowerment, it really doesn't matter whether it's substance use and mental health, because you are sending a message that I'm curious about what you have to say, and I trust that you have the answer. For example, what will you do next? Does that make sense? Like
Yeah,
the parents,
yeah,
they struggle with letting go. They have a dilemma. Can I let go? But part of me feels, but I cannot let go. They seem to struggle so much. And yet,
absolutely.
letting go and allowing them to access their own agency um, is the best approach that I know of. But you can tell me. So when it comes to helping parents, to communicate that I trust you, even if they don't trust, how would that look like?
So for communicating, we have a whole session in our training on communication. Opening up those communication lines is so important. The very first thing that we tell parents, though, is that parents need to, really focus on themselves for a little bit and focus on self-care, self-compassion. In order, it's like that old adage, right? Putting the oxygen mask on first before you can take care of somebody else. For me, getting that healthy grounding is so important. But starting to change the way we're communicating with our children is as equally important. And you can use these, whether it's these tools that we have, whether it's, your child, a loved one, another loved one, a spouse, somebody at work, you can use these tools all over the place, right? Um, it's easy for us, especially as a person not living with a substance use disorder, to see exactly what that person needs to do. And for me, that was really hard to comprehend, right? Because I could see, okay, well, this is happening and you just need help. And then you can just, if you need to take some medication for a little bit, whatever, do what you got to do. Just like, I can see it's a straight line to go and get that help, not realizing for our loved ones, it's really a zigzag line. And
Ah.
my, my toxic part of this would be that I'm one that I would love to like shove information down my kids' throat. Like, this is what you need to do. This is what you have to do.
Mm.
So really learning to hit that pause button if you need to, and not getting into an argument with your loved one, because that's going to get neither of you any place, right? That's not a healthy conversation. So it's okay recognizing that if it's not the best time to have that conversation, if you think they're not being truthful about something, it's really irrelevant, right? So we're just going to hit that pause button
Mhm.
and refocus and, you know, ourselves. And when it's
Mhm.
okay to continue, then we can continue with that conversation. Um, Oftentimes we tell people to use the information sandwich. It's a technique that to get your loved one to hear you more. If you are, maybe asking permission, do they want to hear your thoughts? Are they okay to talk for a few minutes first? And if they say yes, it's, you have that buy-in. They're more willing to hear what you have to say, and you're going to offer that constructive feedback in the middle. And then for that top layer of bread, you're going to just check back for understanding or any questions that they might have. It's a nicer way to have a conversation. So pausing, information sandwich, and just listening and hearing and offering like empathetic statements, validating how they're feeling, even if you're not feeling that same way, offering that validation, for them. And of course, when you're having conversations, it's so important to ask open-ended questions. We don't want to ask a closed question, right? We want to keep that conversation going as long as we can. And even if you're in the middle of the conversation and your loved one gets upset or angry, or the conversation takes a really deep turn, it's okay to stop that conversation and continue it at a later time. Hit that pause button whenever you need to.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah. So there's this, you inviting um, whoever is listening right now. I'm definitely listening because I think with the sooner we start as parents, I think the easier it will come when they get into teenage years, but never is late. But I'm listening to the practice, the ability to pause, ground yourself, and checking in if that sandwich, right? Like, green lights and red lights for if the
Green lights and red
conversation can
lights.
even take place. And yeah, and then
Yeah,
just, yeah.
the green lights and red lights are really also really important, right? If you know ahead of time if you're going to have this important conversation with your loved one, beforehand, plan out ahead of time. Is there a certain day that, or a certain activity that they come home in a better mood? Is there, you don't want to have that conversation when it's going to be rushed. You want to make sure there's enough time and enough privacy to have that conversation and that it's a good time. Oftentimes you'll hear it's best to have that conversation when your loved one is not under the influence. However, for me, that really was never possible. So
Mhm.
I just found it when it was the best time. It was rare to have a time not under the influence of something. So, or probably even never, but yeah, so just finding that time when they're in that better mood. Obviously if they're in the moment of like withdrawing from a substance, would not be a good time to have a conversation, or if they're really angry and or rate at the moment, would probably not be a good time to have a conversation.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think that one of the things that Kathy mentioned too, as far as communication, and one of the things I really love about craft is that it positions you to communicate from an I perspective
Hmm.
instead of you. And that also is another skill to be able to communicate and not support people feeling defensive. You're never on time, or rather than I feel concerned, or it's scary for me when you don't get home on time, or it's so
Mhm.
you're taking responsibility and you're communicating honestly what you're feeling, which is different than an accusatory, like, what are you doing? I think that's another really good tool that I have seen families use to effectively communicate concerns.
Mhm. How can family member who is interested and curious about like, oh, can I really take a course on communication and I don't have to go to grad school or anything, like where is it possible that you know of?
So our partnership, we do offer training for families, for parents of children with a substance use. So they can come to the partnership. They can reach out to me if they are interested. We do have a application on our website for the training. There's no cost for the training. It's
Hmm.
12 weeks, and our first 6 weeks really focuses on craft and the communication skills. And our second 6 weeks, it's a full 12-week program, is focuses on the art of coaching, right? Putting those skills into practice, whether you're going to be using them for coaching
Mhm.
or for just that home with your loved one, right?
Mhm.
So it teaches you more about harm reduction and how to use those skills. And the really exciting part about our second 6 weeks, if we partnered with Google, and we were able to create 5 simulations that parents can practice on. 3 are having conversations with their child, and 2 are having conversations with parents of kids. You
Cool.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's definitely a great tool.
Mm. Yeah, good to know. Resources are out there. And I studied the book Beyond Addiction workbook, and a lot of the craft model is there. Um, but just to clarify, the partnership to end addiction, it's a powerful nonprofit, organization that um, even our listeners can turn to just for families, for the support. And there's also that Center for Motivation and Change that we um, refer, especially spouses, because spouses can find more of the very similar coaching, family coaching, peer
Mhm.
coaching, and the same foundational principles and so many skill set to be learned. And what I know about skills and tools, when applicable, when they are applied, you know then you have change in dynamic. And skills tend to lower anxiety.
Yes, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
And also for parents, maybe that don't want to take the full training but just want support. So CMC offers a training, partnership to end addiction offers a training. Partnership also has, if they go to our website at drugfree.org, we have a helpline, and parents can call the helpline. It's always free, and connect with a clinician who will guide them on next steps, and possibly if they're not a parent, but maybe another program might be better for them, they'll help them locate another program, whether it be Smart Recovery or CMC for spouses, or
Mhm.
whatever other program might be best for that family member. Or even if oftentimes we get people that are using a substance that might call in, and they'll help them to get to the right location. But family members, when they call in, they can stay with the parents. When they call in, I should say, they can either stay with the clinician and work directly with them for a period of time, but at some point they will be referred over potentially to our parent coaches. We have a whole slew of specially trained parent coaches
Mhm.
that either are text coaches or phone coaches, and they'll work with the parents for 4 to 6 weeks on developing, having that conversation with their child, and teaching them some of those skills,
Mhm.
and just listening, right? That's such an important thing, because oftentimes family members, we're told that, we're a part of the problem. And that's absolutely not true. Family members, especially empowered family members, are extremely vital in their family members' recovery.
Mhm.
So we work really hard to empower family members to have that information so that they can be a tool to their loved one in recovery.
Mhm.
Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, so they can connect with our coach. And then once that parent coaching is done, or even before, we also have online support groups several times a week, almost every day.
Mhm.
Parents can, log in right through online on our website and attend support groups, which are also based on the craft model
Mhm.
with specially
Amazing.
trained facilitators.
Yeah.
You
So,
know, and I think that a valuable piece of this is what families communicate, what you communicate by engaging in help for yourself and taking advantage of the resources and support. You're mirroring
mhm.
what you would like your loved one to do. You're being the best example if you're
Mhm.
taking care of yourself, if you're taking care
Yeah.
of your needs, if
Mhm.
you're learning new skills to communicate, if you're doing all those things,
Mhm.
you are demonstrating, versus telling people what they should do. You are showing what
Mhm.
what works, and I think there's a power in that. There's a power in families and people owning their own part of that conversation, and how
Mhm.
they, and knowing that they have power in that. They have
Mhm.
power in owning how they respond.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel just empowered in this very moment. You shared some of your stories, and part of my story is that I'm adult child of addict alcoholic. And then I have my own children. And if I just leave this, if I just say to myself, as long I'm not at it, or I'm not having the struggling with addictions, my kids will be okay. And actually, I'm just realizing how much I am, because of my own experience, how much I tend to hover and control, the matters of my children. And I am actually very motivated to learn these tools as prevention, so I
Mhm.
can learn how to talk to them. How am I supposed to know it just because I'm therapist? No, I believe that that can happen to my children too, but I'm just more aware of these that I need to take more preventive approach and still proactive approach, and
Yeah.
I'm just very very motivated to look at, and if we have listeners who have middle-aged children, they are going, or the high school, please don't despair. You do have some power to learn how to connect with them. And what I also learned from your Kathy's website, your organization, the nonprofit, the Partnership to End Addiction, there's just very empowering messages. Like, don't think that um, vaping, smoking weed, or drinking is supposed to be something normal, something that you need to like l-
Yeah.
look aside. And
Yeah.
and that really caught my attention,
Yeah. And I'll
in
tell
terms of
you,
prevention.
that was a big part of my story looking back as you're saying that. I mean, when I was in high school, I was like what, I thought would be a normal, high school kid. I worked, I went to school,
Mm,
but I also, I drank, I smoked weed after school every day. We partied all weekend. Uh, but when I found out that I was pregnant, right after, not too long after high school, I stopped everything immediately, just like that. So when my kids started going through this, right, when they were in high school,
mhm,
I just thought, oh, it's a phase. That's how I initially thought, it's just a phase. And
mhm,
I think that had a lot to do with my perception when I raised my nephews, like, well, I just stopped, like, why can't you? Like, not
mhm,
realizing
mhm,
everybody's brain and chemistry and, everything is different. There's a lot of genetics involved in addiction as well. And for
Mhm.
some reason, I was spared that. I'm not sure, why or how, but I'm very thankful that I was. But unfortunately, my kids were not. So, and my kids had it from both families. Um, so yeah, they somehow it skipped me that, but I
Mhm.
figured, well, I didn't drink my kids, once I had my
Mhm.
kids
Yeah.
and became the legal drinking age, I've never had a drink. Um, so yeah, I don't, I certainly, I choose to stay, not drinking, in support of my kids that are in recovery.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's also helpful to, Kathy, I hear you with the expectations. It's also interesting, it's been my experience working in treatment that families sometimes put their loved one in treatment and then expect to get this new person back and this,
Yeah.
everything's going to be okay now and everything, and they don't realize that journey, that high and low, those
Yeah.
challenges, those day to day, they don't understand relapse. They have these beliefs that, oh well, this is it, right? You fixed my kid, and so sometimes they're tempted to say, well, then I don't have to do any work, or maybe I don't, and they don't understand that this is a journey. There's not an event of
Yeah.
recovery, that recovery is a journey, and
Mhm.
that again, building and developing their communication and resources and support will sustain them for the highs and the lows, because there's going to be those, there's going to
Yes.
there is it's going to they're going to happen.
Yeah.
And so not waiting until the lows happen, but during the highs, developing those skills, you'll be able to employ them at a time when you really need them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I remember that so well, Joy. The first, time that one of my kids went into treatment and
Mhm.
expecting like, oh, they're all better, it's done, we're fixed now, they're coming home a whole new person and not making any changes like within the household. And it became really difficult here, right, with having more than one child, using substances. They became triggers for each other. So it was like
Mhm.
a really hard process to learn and go through. And, and now that they're adults, they're aware, and in recovery, they're aware of what those limitations are. They figured that out, amongst
Mhm.
themselves. But yeah, it's just so true. And I worked really hard too with changing like myself and my reaction to things and also my language.
Mhm.
I was in a lot of groups that our kids were our addict daughter or addict son, like, and they had like little abbreviations like ADAS or recovering addict daughter, like RAD. And I'm just like, no, there are kids. Like, I'm not calling my child that, like that's
Mhm.
my child. They're my child first and always, my, daughter or my son. Um, and then their disease is secondary. And
Mhm.
using things like substance use disorder over addiction where I can. And, people would call and say, is so and so clean? And then I would just start saying, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they took a shower this morning, but I haven't checked.
Uh-huh.
So I can ask if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just
Yeah.
trying to mirror that language for other parents to
Yeah.
start using better language and having those conversations because it's just derogatory, right? Who wants to be called a derogatory name? And even if your child refers to themselves as an addict, I still will not refer to my kids as an
Mhm.
addict. They're in recovery, they're, whatever they're doing, but
Mhm.
or maybe they had a setback or instead of a relapse, things like that.
Well,
Yeah.
And
and
then,
that's what, to your point, is that's so the addict alcoholic, that's I call it the inside voice and the outside voice. So
yeah,
support groups often use that, and that's how people self-identify. But outside of that, using those words can mean a lot of other things, and most of the time they're not positive. So
Mhm.
you're right, Kathy. It's important to know where to use them in the context. They can certainly call themselves whatever they need to identify with their peer group. But outside, how I frame people with mental health, do I say crazy or somebody diagnosed with a mental health disorder? Do I say substance use disorder or addict? And those things really do make a difference. They make a difference to how people see disorders and people who suffer from them.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And also another expectation is that our child, or loved one, this worked for so and so, so this is going to work. That was my beginning. I read and researched everything that I could, and I was going to find the cure. I was going to figure this out. So, but realizing, especially with more than one child, that there's so many variables, right? Are they part of the LGB community? I have a child that is, and they required very special treatment. I have a daughter and I have a son, and they required different treatment, so each journey is so different. What works for one doesn't work for the other. And having more than one child, I saw that play out like right in front of me, so I can guarantee you that that's true.
Yeah. So we're coming out of the age of even treatment centers, to the stigmatizing patients and perhaps even family members. And I'm just so it's so refreshed to hear that there is an evidence-based approach based on compassion, kindness, and it doesn't mean that people are looking the other way. Yeah. How do you would reframe, working with family members who in traditional old way, they may have been even taught that they are enablers or they are codependent. I'd like to hear both of your, thoughts on this.
So I do not use the words enabler or codependent. I was called an enabler and codependent several times. I probably still am at some points, but now I take the time to correct people where I didn't used to. But I think family members just do the best that they can with what they have. And as family members, we love our loved one that's living with the addiction. And I also stopped saying struggling with addiction, by the way, because at one point in my journey, I realized that my kids seemed quite happy and I was the one that was really struggling with it. So I decided that they were living with their addiction and I was the one maybe I was the one struggling. So but yeah, so when our loved one is living with addiction, we can I don't even remember what I was gonna say. I'm so sorry. I forgot where I was going with
No,
that.
I love that though.
Yeah, I got into my living with addiction and I forgot what the question was.
Oh, the codependency, like
Oh, the
what
codependency. Yes.
what
See,
would you
look.
say to people that, or
Yeah.
how do you view that or how do
So
you
yes,
respond
I
to
say living with addiction. You can edit that part out, right?
that?
No, you said we weren't live.
It's just a
So,
lived experience, You
yes,
shared
yes.
your lived
Yes.
experience.
So
Yes.
I wanted
So,
to, oh, go ahead. Sorry. I
oh
thought you
no.
were
So for codependent, I think families just do the best with what they have, at the time, and they love their loved one and would in no way do anything to harm them. So they're doing the best they can with what they have.
So and I'm not a fan of those words either anymore. And first of all, actually fact is that the word codependency is not a clinical diagnosis. It's not a clinical. I mean, it might be a set of characteristics that somebody somewhere identified in a book that resonated with people, but it's not a diagnosis. And so what I believe, the way that I see family members and their response to substance use, it is their responses are natural responses to something horrific and scary and overwhelming. And so to pathologize that and give them that message, like how sick you are and how, I go back to what Kathy said. They are doing the best they can with the information they have. And so, as much as we've learned about being compassionate for people with use disorders, we have to extend that compassion to family members who, I hate to say it this way, but I kind of don't have the luxury of numbing themselves with substances. They're not the ones that get all of that treatment. They don't get to go away for 30 days. Their life still happens. And so they have to find these resources. In some ways, they don't necessarily have all the resources that we extend to the loved one. So, so looking at them in a compassionate way and understanding, wow, I understand why you did that, because you're trying to survive, trying to manage those feelings. I mean, any parent that I know, including myself, I feel it as I say it in my heart. Any parent who thinks about the loss of a child, when you breathe, I can't breathe when I say that.
Yeah.
And so, when I think about trying to manage, hopefully keeping your kid alive, you're doing things that, of course, may not make sense to the rest of the world, but they make sense in the moment based on what you know and the skills you have at the time. So, so Kathy, that doing the best they can with what they have at that moment is so important. Yes. And finding people who are compassionate, finding support that is compassionate, and not just that same pointing the finger stuff is so valuable. And they deserve it.
It is. And yeah, that's we do work with parents on that as well as part of the craft model, and it really focuses around natural consequences, allowing natural consequences to happen. When we're fighting to keep our kids alive and have that real fear of them dying, as parents, we're made to protect our kids, right? That's our first instinct, is to protect our kids against whatever danger. And this is a danger for our kids, and we're like in overtime trying to fix that. And we're doing things that we would typically not ordinarily do to protect them. So yeah, we work with parents on we oftentimes put a pillow out to soften that blow. So when it's safe, we work with parents. Obviously, if they're possibly overdosing, that would not be a natural consequence. But with certain things, oversleeping for work, forgetting to call off, those natural consequences that are coming with using substances, to, not wake them up when that happens 50 times, let them feel those consequences.
Yeah. So that's a good point, that it's that concept, allowing natural consequences to take place. And I'm assuming it has something to do how that experience for the person who is using substances, how it's kind of bad experience, so they need to have it to motivate them, even if it would be just mental dilemma, like that doesn't feel so great. Yeah.
And then sometimes one of my favorite terms is, so what's your plan for that? Or what do you think you should do about that? Because a lot of times, we give the answers, oh, well, you should, or you should, or you should, and not empowering them to even think about that they have agency in that choice.
Exactly. And that's what all of our coaches do, right? They're not going to tell you what to do or tell you, but they'll ask you those questions, what do you think should happen? What's a good idea here? They'll go through the different tools, but they're not going to give you your answers, because only you can answer what's best for you and your family.
Yeah. And as we are moving to a landing phase of our conversation here, I wonder, I am getting impression, and I have been in this field for over 20 years, and I can say I am an expert and I know a lot of things. But when it comes to my personal life, I have a lot of work to do. And I am going to get education, how to use these tools in my personal life. because somehow it's easier in professional life, and I am
Yeah.
open to be teachable. What would be your advice for parents who are listening now and they're realizing that they may have addiction in their family lineage, there may be a need to learn to communicate with rebellious teenagers. What would be your advice where to go?
So this information can be used for any conversations. It does not just have to be rebellious kids, but you can use this anywhere, right? For parents that realize they have addiction in their genetics and lineage, it does not mean that their child is going to have a substance use disorder, but it's important to have those conversations
Oh, yeah.
to
Mm-hmm.
make the kids aware that this
Mm-hmm.
can happen, that that addiction is there. That's something we didn't do in our family. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it would have been different if we had been more aware. We didn't know it was genetic. Nobody ever told us that. We had no clue that it was genetic, that um, our kids had a high likelihood of having a substance use disorder, or that opioid pills were addictive. We would have never had them take them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had no clue what we were battling, but now all of this information is out, all of this information is here. Um, so educating is the number one part, right? Having those tough conversations before they happen. I even, now my grandkids, we started having these conversations at 2 or 3 years old, just easy conversations, age appropriate conversations around dangerous substances, or poisons, in the household, and, not taking any medication that anybody gives you or any candy from people, just little things like that building up to the older ages. And then, by the time they're like 9, 10, and 11, having conversations about pills. And now it's so important so much sooner. In our grief groups, we are seeing, a lot of parents with really younger kids, that who
Mm-hmm.
just took a pill at a party and had no clue what it was, and it ended up being fentanyl, right? I've met so many parents, unfortunately, of kids that were 12, 13, 14 years old, and they never had a chance, right? They never had a chance to become addicted to anything. They were so young. So it's really important. I can't stress that enough, of having those conversations early. It seems, so young, but my 9-year-old is aware of fentanyl and
Mm-hmm.
pills, and asks questions, why is it safe to take this pill? And, you just gave me Tylenol. Is this safe? So we have those hard conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for just bringing it up. It's about just having courage to have those conversations. There
Yeah,
is no any way around it. Yeah.
there's not. There's not.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think my 9-year-old, we had our death, our Thomas died of fentanyl poisoning. And so I always said that he took a pill that he shouldn't have taken, was how we started out that conversation, because she was 3 when it happened. But then recently she said, but how do I know that the Tylenol is safe? So then we had
Mhm.
to have that further conversation at this point. So
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It
I
is.
think, just keeping those conversations going is what makes it safe, and what made her bring up that, Kathy, to you, and say it and ask the questions, because of how you've communicated in the past, and it wasn't a secret, it wasn't a thing nobody talked about, that allowing those conversations to seem natural, and a part of any conversation, taking
yeah,
that power out of that silence, that this disorder, and both mental health and substance use, uh, still is shameful in some circles, in some
yeah,
cultures, and some, so teaching people how to continue to have those conversations.
Yeah. When we become skillful communicators, in and especially in personal lives. It's very empowering. And I want to thank you for bringing your lived experiences, but also your professional experience, working with real people, whether these are patients or alumni or these are family members. I really feel so much hope for that there are resources. So I wanted to thank you for making difference in this fight war, with this disease, and really impacting, the world. You certainly made an impact talking to our listeners, and I'm just happy that we'll be building on, in our organization as well, to coaching and giving resources to family members we work with.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. And I'm grateful to be your colleague, Ivona. I love your passion for families.
Yeah. Oh, I am blessed. Have a
Same.
great day, and we'll be in touch. And thank you, listeners, for your attention and curiosity and the interest in this, and courage to have tough conversations. Thank you for tuning in. The First Responder Families podcast is sponsored by Shatterproof at FHE Health, a specialized treatment program for first responders with mental health and/or substance use issues. For more information about our show and our services, check out FHEHealth.com. The podcast website also has a place where you can share your ideas or questions for future shows. If you are struggling, we want to help. Feel free to call us at 844-714-3403 or visit FHEHealth.com. We look forward to having you join us for our podcast next month. Until then, take care.